I'm so excited to be here. And I'm not going to lie, mostly because I get to see the 2019 State Teachers of the Year. You have an amazing resource here in front of you. And I hope that you will continue the relationships you're building with them and continue to work with them to build systems that truly serve our students. So I'm going to start by telling you about a couple of my students. So this, if my clicker works, it's not. So here we go. So this is Neruz and Mohammed. These are two amazing individuals who I have had the pleasure of having in my classroom. So Neruz and Mohammed came to the United States as refugees from Syria in 2016. And the difference about Neruz and Mohammed is that they are deaf. So when they first came into my classroom, I was told that they would just need AM/FM systems because they were wearing hearing aids in both ears, and that's all I would need in order to be able to teach them. But as class went on and time moved forward, I still didn't have the AM/FM system. And I was noticing that Neruz and Mohammed weren't making any indication that they were learning. They weren't making any sound at all. And so I began to wonder if our assumptions about their hearing were correct. So I reached out and I met with their family. And I actually learned that they hadn't just recently become deaf, because that's what I had been told, that they'd recently become deaf because of the situation in Syria when a bomb ripped through their apartment. But in actuality, Neruz and Mohammed were born deaf. They were profoundly deaf, and of the family's 4 children, 3 of those children were deaf. So these students had been sitting in my class for a month, not hearing anything. So being who I am, and being very assertive, I immediately started to reach out to everyone I could think of. I started with audiology, thinking they're in charge, they're who I should go to. But as you know, in systems, especially large school districts, there is a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of hierarchies, and there's always a chain of command. So my ability to reach out to audiology was limited. I tried, but they wouldn't speak directly to me because there's a chain of command. So I went to my supervisor. She assured me they were doing everything that they were supposed to be doing. I went to a counselor. We didn't have counselors for our English learners at that time. I was my student's counselor. So there was that piece that was missing. And finally, I met with the school nurse. The school nurse. And I don't know how much you guys know about school nurses, but ours is a bulldog. And I told her what was happening with Neruz and Mohammed, and by now we're already 2 months into the school year. I'm failing them as their teacher, and our system is failing them. And it was the school nurse who got the ball rolling. She was able to reach out to audiology, and we set up a meeting. Not only that, she found sign language instruction outside of school, and I started attending classes with my students and their family. And then we brought sign language into the classroom, and finally, my students were able to connect and communicate with their peers, with me, and we began to see these students learn. But as we progressed with this experience, we just faced obstacle after obstacle after obstacle in this huge, cumbersome system. We finally got the kids a 504 plan, which mandated that they have interpretation and sign language instruction at school as well. But we weren't finished because we were still dealing with assumptions. And it was assumed that because Nowruz and Mohammed came together, that they would progress together through our English language development program at exactly the same pace, so they'd only need one interpreter. But we all know students all learn in different manners and at different paces. So we had to get them an IEP to demand that everything be followed for these students. But that was another barrier, because in order to get an IEP for an English language learner, you first have to prove that it's not language. Well, how do you do that with two students who are profoundly deaf, were never fluent in their first language of Arabic, didn't know sign language when they came to the United States, and were just beginning to have language in their lives? But we pushed, and we persevered, and a year and a half later, a year and a half, you guys, we finally had everything that these students would need to succeed. They both now have interpreters who go with them to every single class. They're having sign language instruction several times a week at school, including speech pathology, because they now have cochlear implants. And they continue to take those sign language classes outside of school. And I am excited to tell you that I'm going back to the classroom. I'm so excited. And there's a chance that these two beautiful humans might be in my class one more time. So Nowruz and Mohammed's story is a success story. We were able to accomplish what we needed to accomplish for them. And both of them are doing amazing. They have designs on attending Gallaudet University. They're progressing through our English language development program. They're taking mainstream classes. Mohammed plays lunch basketball. And Nowruz one day is going to be an American Sign Language educator. No, thank you. But the real reason I'm telling you this story is because it demonstrates so many things that are obstacles for us in meeting the needs of our individual students. So many times we follow systems because that's what we've always done. We have, I need the last slide, but it's not moving. In the 21st century, we use a 19th century school model with 20th century values. And there's clearly something wrong with this picture, because we follow systems simply because they've become the system we follow. And we don't question, are students at the center of those systems? Have we met with the most impacted communities and determined exactly what needs to happen in order to meet their needs? Or are we simply following systems because it's what we've always done? It's tradition, it's easy, we know what to do and what to expect, it's efficient, it keeps things moving forward. We can't do that anymore. We never should have been doing that in the first place. So as I stand in front of you, you have the power to change that, to make real systems change. And this is how. Number one, recognize that you don't have the experience. You're not in school buildings. So make sure that you're speaking with teachers, inviting them to the table, not only to tell their stories, but to impact policy, to develop it, and to implement it, because they know what's going on in our schools. And make sure that this isn't a rigid system, but it's flexible. Flexible enough to meet the needs of every single individual student. And ensure that you're supporting programs that elevate educator voice, programs like the State Teacher of the Year and National Board, because those programs are the programs that brought me here to this stage. And they've elevated my voice enough to where you're listening to me right now. So do that for the educators in your communities. And most importantly, and I'm excited for Dr. Johnson to come out here and talk in just a moment, know your communities. Go out and speak with them. Because the only way that we're going to meet every single student's needs is if we move out of the 19th and 20th centuries, come into the 21st century, and ensure that every single student is seen, is heard, and that we are able to have flexible systems to meet their needs. Thank you.